The first loud scream went across the Arizona land long before anyone saw the blood on the nun's leg. She walked unsteadily through the dry grass outside Silver Valley, holding her dress tight. Her eyes were wide with a fear that did not belong in a holy woman. Something moved in the dust at her feet. Then the sound came, that angry, dry, rattling sound that makes a soul freeze even under the burning summer sun. The rattlesnake bit once, very fast. It sank its teeth deep into the pale skin just above her boot. She hit at the snake, but it was already moving away. It left 2 dark drops of poison swelling in her skin. The church walls were a mile behind her, and the church bells were silent. The nearest help was a single rider moving cattle along the fence line. Samuel Reed was 48 years old. He was a rancher with a sunburned neck and a heart that had already buried a wife and a son. He heard that scream and pulled his horse around so hard the animal jumped up. Then he saw her black clothes against the gold color of the grass. A nun, alone, bent over like a broken doll. By the time he got down from the saddle, the poison had already begun its slow, cruel climb up her leg. Her hands shook as she tried to stand. She failed. She looked up at the stranger, at the rough hands reaching for her, and shame fought with fear in her eyes. "The snake bit you high on the leg," he said, breathing hard. "If I don't help, you will die before the sun goes down." Sister Clara knew what he meant. The wound was under heavy black cloth, too high up for a proper touch. Her promises to God screamed at her. Modesty and obedience were the rules that had kept her safe behind stone walls. Out here, the only rule was staying alive. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking, "don't make me do this." Samuel stared right back, his jaw tight. "Sister, I am not asking for sin," he said. "I am asking for permission to save your life." With shaking fingers, she gathered the skirt of her dress, lifting it just enough to show the swollen skin. Tears fell as she showed more leg than any nun should. He dropped to his knees in the dust. His knife shone as he cut the cloth, pressing his mouth to the wound, spitting poison into the dirt. They were so focused on life and death that neither of them noticed the wagon coming up the road. They didn't see the 2 women standing in the back, mouths open in shock. They didn't hear the driver use a bad word under his breath at the sight of a rancher on his knees between a nun's legs. By the time Samuel looked up, the wagon was already turning around fast. It was racing straight towards Silver Valley with a story that would make the whole town angry. If a man risks his name to save a nun's life, what will that town do to him when the story reaches their ears, twisted and dirty? By evening, the story had grown dangerous. By the time the wagon rolled into Silver Creek, folks were already talking about a rancher on his knees with his face up a nun's skirt. At the Blue Moon Saloon, men dropped their cards and leaned in close. Reed did what to Sister Clara? Nobody had the facts, but that never stopped a thirsty town from gossiping. Someone else promised she was crying. By the 3rd time the story was told, Samuel was not saving her life, he was ruining it. Sheriff Frank Miller stepped out of his office with a cigar in his teeth and greed in his eyes. Miller was the kind of man who would smell a scandal the way a bird smells death. He had never liked Samuel. Samuel had spoken too loudly about stolen land the year before, and about a sheriff who ignored it. Now Miller had a gift dropped right in his lap. He walked straight to the little church where Sister Clara lay on a narrow bed, pale but breathing. The bite was angry and red, but the fever had passed. She tried to sit up when he came in, holding the blanket to her throat. "Did he touch you where he should not have, sister?" Miller asked. The question itself felt like a slap. Sister shook her head, eyes flashing with anger. "He saved my life," she said. "If Samuel Reed had not been there, I would be buried on the hill by now." Miller didn't want that answer. He wanted a scandal he could use like a stolen horse. He stepped back out into the sunlight and told the crowd what they were hungry to hear. Rancher took advantage of a woman of God. That was all it took. They dragged Samuel off his porch before he had even taken the saddle off his horse. He didn't fight at first. He knew how this town worked. 1 angry sheriff, 3 loud drunk men, and the truth didn't stand a chance. They pushed him through the door of the small stone jail, fists and elbows flying. 1 punch hit his jaw just enough to hurt his pride. Some of these men had once shared his dinner table. He heard someone shout that a man like him ought to hang for what he did to a nun. He heard another voice, softer, trying to cut through the noise. Clara. They would not let her near. Miller told him there would be a public hearing on Sunday, right there in the square where the whipping post stood. "Town wants a show, Reed," the sheriff said. "Better start praying." The jail sank into quiet. Samuel sat on the hard bed, jaw hurting, wondering how a few seconds of kindness could wreck a whole life. Late that night, the jail stayed quiet, but the church didn't. Father Thomas woke to frantic knocking at the door. When he opened it, Sister Clara stood there in the moonlight, hair damp with sweat, hands held tight in prayer. "Father, if you don't open that cell for an innocent man," she said, voice shaking, "I will kneel here on this step until the sun comes up." The old priest knew Sheriff Miller. He knew his temper, and he knew his tricks with the truth. He closed his eyes for a long moment, then reached for the ring of keys hanging inside his study. A little while later, in the stone jailhouse, Samuel lifted his head at the sound of a lock turning, slow and careful in the dark. If that door opened, would Samuel Reed walk out and let a nun and an old priest turn him into an outlaw? The key turned slow, like the hand using it was arguing with itself. The cell door made a noise, and Samuel saw Father Thomas first, his shoulders bent under a worn black coat, candle shaking in his hand. Behind him, half hidden in the shadows, stood Sister Clara, eyes wide, cheeks still pale from fever. "You have one chance to walk out of here, son," the priest said quietly. "I'm too old to stand against Sheriff Miller in the daylight, but I won't leave an innocent man in a cage at night." Clara stepped forward, her voice barely more than a breath. "Stand up," she whispered. "You can't stay here. They will hang you by Sunday." Samuel pushed himself to his feet, joints stiff, looking from the priest to the nun. "You sure you both want to carry this trouble with me?" he asked. Father Thomas sighed. "Some sins are worth keeping quiet," he said. "I would rather answer to God than to Sheriff Miller." He stepped out past the priest and the nun into the cool desert night. Clara walked ahead, moving fast for someone still weak. One hand pressed against the church bandage on her leg. Samuel followed close, ready to catch her if she stumbled. They slipped behind the stable where 2 horses waited. Not his horses. Too clean, too well fed. These belonged to the church. Samuel reached into the small leather bag tied to his saddle and pulled out a dark glass bottle. "Medicine," he said. "It won't heal you, but it will take the edge off the pain for a while." Clara waited only a second, then drank the bitter liquid past her lips, coughing as it burned its way down. "They'll notice these are gone," he whispered. "Not before Sunday," she said. "By then you'll be far from Silver Valley." But Samuel shook his head. "I'm not running, not without clearing my name." She looked up at him, breath shaking in the cool night air. "Then we need proof," she said. "There is a Navajo boy on the far ridge. He herds goats up there. He saw everything. He saw the snake bite me. He saw you save me." "Then find him and bring him back before the hearing." They got on the horses and rode out of town, feet soft in the sand, the church bells behind them ringing midnight. Clara held tight to the saddle horn, her dress whipping in the wind, every breath sounding like it cost her something. Samuel kept looking over, worried she might fall, worried the fever might return again. After a few miles, she finally spoke. "Samuel, if Miller's men find us first, they'll shoot you before they ask questions." He gave a dry smile. "Ma'am, I've been shot at before, but never while riding with a nun." She actually laughed, a tired little sound that made the night feel warmer. They rode on toward the ridge, toward the boy, toward the only chance he had to stay a 3-man. But out there in the dark, a rustle in the brush made Samuel slow his horse. Someone was following, and it was not a friend. If you're still here listening, take a sip of your tea and tell me what time is it where you are and where you're listening from. And if you want the next part of this story, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. They were still a few miles from the ridge when Samuel pulled his horse short. The sound in the brush came again, soft but steady, like someone trying too hard to stay quiet. Clara leaned in close, voice trembling. "Is it Miller's men?" Samuel didn't answer right away. He just listened. Then a small figure stepped out from behind a tree, a thin boy with long black hair and a nervous stare. It was the kid Clara had spoken of, a Navajo boy from the hills above town. His name was Toby, about 10 or maybe 11, barefoot, quick on his feet, smelling of smoke and sheep. Behind him, a small group of goats moved nervously on the slope. He pointed at her leg. "Snake bit you. I saw it," he said. His voice was small, but the truth in it was steady. Clara smiled with relief. Samuel felt the weight on his chest ease just a little. They had a witness, a kid who had nothing to gain by lying. But before Samuel could say a word, Toby grabbed his arm. "They're coming," he whispered. "3 riders. Sheriff sent them." And just like that, the chase was on again. Samuel swung Toby up onto his horse without a second thought. "Hold on tight, kid." The small weight pressed against his back for a moment, and his chest tightened. For just a heartbeat, it felt like his own boy again, the one he had buried on a hot, windless bay years before. He grabbed Clara's reins and shouted for her to ride. They sped over the ridge, dust kicking behind them, the sun dropping fast, painting the desert gold. Behind them, the riders closed in, their shouts echoing across the rocks. At one point, Clara stumbled in the saddle, her wound pulling hard. Samuel reached out, steadying her with one hand. "You stay with me," he said. "I'm not losing you tonight." Samuel pulled them behind the low wall. The riders thundered past, fooled by the dark, only the sound of horses breathing and Clara trying to catch her breath. Samuel looked at Toby. "You ready to stand in front of a whole town and speak the truth?" Toby nodded. "I am not scared of Miller." Samuel smiled a tired smile. "Kid, that makes one of us." They waited until the night grew safe enough to travel again. Then they headed straight for Silver Valley. Sunday morning, the hearing would begin, and this time, Samuel Reed would not be walking in alone. But as they approached the edge of town, Clara pulled her horse to a stop. Her face had changed. Her hands were twisting at the reins. "Samuel," she whispered, "what if the truth frees you but destroys me?" And that was the kind of question a man could answer with his heart or his silence. So which one would Samuel choose? Samuel didn't look away from her. "The truth is not mine or yours," he said quietly. "It belongs to God and to that town. We carry it together or we both stay in chains." The whole town crowded into the square, hungry for a show. Sheriff Miller stood tall in his coat, acting like judge and jury. They dragged Samuel up in front of everyone, wrists tied, jaw set. Clara stood near the church steps, face pale, hands twisted in a rosary. Toady hovered behind her, eyes wide, taking in every angry face. Miller stepped forward. "This man disgraced a woman of God," he shouted. "He shamed our town." And before the gossip could rise, Clara stepped out, voice trembling but loud. "That is a lie," she said. "If you hang him, the sin'll be on you, not on him." The crowd murmured. It's hard to enjoy a scandal when a nun is staring into your soul. The judge raised his hand. "We will hear witnesses." Toby walked up, small but steady. He told them about the rattlesnake, about the bite, about the blood and the panic. He told them how Samuel cut the cloth and removed the poison, how there had been no laughing, no pleasure, only fear. One man in the crowd laughed. "You're really gonna trust an Indian kid?" he called out. The judge looked over his glasses and gave him a tired stare. "I'm going to trust anyone who sounds like they remember what they saw," he said. "So far, that is more than I can say for some of you." Miller tried to shut him up, tried to call him a wild kid who didn't know what he saw. But then an old woman spoke up. She had seen the wagon racing in, had heard the women twisting the story for free drinks. Truth walks slow, but it always gets there. The judge finally spoke. "There is no crime here," he said. "This man is free, and this town ought to be ashamed of how quickly it chose dirt over facts. The town found out he had his own secrets with land and money. By Friday, the county man rode in and took Miller's badge.
Folks went home quieter than they came. Later, at the edge of town, Clara stood beside the stagecoach. Her bag was small, her heart anything but small. She took a deep breath, then reached up and took off the simple wooden rosary from around her neck. The beads were worn smooth from years of fingers and prayers. She pressed it into Samuel's hand and closed his fingers around it. "I have carried this since the day I took my vows," she said softly. "I can't give you my life, but I can give you my prayers." She met his eyes. "I love you," she said, "but I gave my first yes to God. If I stay with you, I break that promise. If I go, I break something inside me." Samuel swallowed, his thumb moving over the old wooden beads. "I think a man only gets 1 or 2 chances in life to do the right thing," he said, his voice low, "even when it hurts a lot. This is mine." She nodded, tears bright but not falling. "Real love sometimes means letting go," she whispered. He didn't trust his voice, so he just touched the edge of his hat in a small salute, the rosary still wrapped in his fist. She climbed aboard, the coach rolled away in a cloud of dust, and he raised his hat until she was only a memory against the sky. Out there under that Arizona sun, Samuel kept working his land a little more gentle, a little more watchful of lonely riders on the road. Clara kept her vows in another town, but every rattlesnake story and every sermon carried a piece of him. So let me ask you, would you speak the truth if it cost you everything? If this story touched you even a little, tap like, hit subscribe, and stay with me for more tales from the Old West. That's all the trail I've got for you today, partner. Ride easy till next time. Pour yourself another cup of coffee or tea and tell me in the comments what time is it where you are and where are you listening from.